Welcome to Please Me, the award-winning bilingual podcast bringing you bold conversations and big clit energy. Sí, Please Me se puede ver con subtítulos en español. I'm Eve, your host, on a journey from trauma to sexual liberation. Join me and my guests as we dive into conversations around orgasm equality, self-love, body positivity, and essential sexual education. Let's reclaim pleasure and close the orgasm gap, one empowering conversation at a time. Last week, I spoke with Lexi Silver about the difference between an alleged P. Diddy freak-off and an ethical non-monogamous swinger party. Bottom line, P. Diddy was not a swinger, and those events were the antithesis of true consent. Tune into this episode to explore a widely misunderstood part of modern sexuality. I'm beyond thrilled and deeply honored to be nominated for 2 ASN awards. The categories are Best Educator and Best Educator Website, so be sure to check out my website to see all the great educational resources there, including my favorite products I use myself for optimal health, as well as my beautifully curated sex toy store. You can vote daily, so check the show notes to cast your vote and help me bring these wins home. I'm so grateful for every one of you. Thank you for your support. Did you know that podcasts rely on listener support to keep bringing you the content you love? For the best way to support the show, join me on Patreon for ad-free listening, early releases, bonus episodes, and exclusive content. Please Me is for mature audiences. Sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
People often say, how do you know that most people are having unprotected oral sex? And I say, go to the local Walgreens or gas station or grocery store or wherever you can find condoms, and you tell me if you see a dental dam there. I've never seen one in a store. And so it's just obvious that people are not having protected oral sex. And if there was a better option.
ASN Lifestyle Magazine is your go-to source for sex-positive, sophisticated content covering everything from the swinger lifestyle and adult entertainment to intimacy, wellness, and more. You can read every digital issue for free, and subscribers get access to exclusive content. See the show notes for the link to subscribe and check out their Instagram. I'm excited to share that I now have a monthly column in ASN called Big Clit Energy, a Please Me series. Don't miss it and subscribe today.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Meta AI is the personal AI that's tailored to you, now with its very own app. It's built to get to know you, offering helpful answers and inspiration. Looking for something to add to your bucket list? Meta AI goes beyond traveling the world. It remembers you're a basketball fanatic and suggests you attend one of the playoff games. Just start typing or speaking to get the answers you need, wherever and whenever, because Meta AI is your personal AI. Download the Meta AI app, now available on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
Parents of twins, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
What's worse than an ad interrupting your favorite music or podcast? That uninspired coffee you've been drinking while working, which is why Flavia is elevating your everyday coffee experience. Now you can enjoy cafe-quality beverages like coffee, tea, frothy lattes, and creamy hot chocolate made right in your home office, actual office, or wherever you want to upgrade your mug with bold, delicious flavors. Visit Flavia.com to shop the collection of machines and beverages now.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into the classroom. And I'm so excited to welcome Robert Johnson to the show today. And he is going to be talking about something that I, as the face of safe sex, say is so important, which is testing. He built a telemedicine company after giving someone gonorrhea and testing negative. And so welcome to the show, Robert. And I want to know how that could happen. How can somebody test negative for gonorrhea and then still pass it along? Let's talk about that first.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. So basically, and this was news to me, and this happened maybe 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. I had just gotten a quote unquote complete STI test, which I had done every 6 months for about the past previous decade. I just never had a symptom, just would go to urgent care, would go to primary care, would kind of just wherever. I thought a full panel STI test was like a definitive thing. And so it didn't really matter to me where I got that. And every single time as a male, it was always a blood draw and a urine test, and out the door I go. And then I get my results and they're negative. But then I had a partner text me and tell me that I had given her gonorrhea, and we're consensually non-monogamous. So as I tell this story, I just realized that everybody was fully aware of what was happening. And she was also asymptomatic, but her husband had become terribly symptomatic, and all signs pointed back to me. And I was really surprised by that for a couple of reasons. One was I felt absolutely fine. And I was also not aware that you could have gonorrhea and not have any symptoms. I must admit I didn't know that either. But also I was looking at a gonorrhea test result of negative that I had just gotten just since I had been with her. And so that was really interesting to me. So I shared that with her and she said, have you ever been throat swab tested? And I must admit, I had never even heard of that before. Like I had literally never heard of it. And it was really humbling because I had really thought of myself as this really progressive person when it comes to STI testing. And I really took a lot of pride in that. So it was humbling to realize I didn't really know that much about it. But it also made me a little bit mad because apparently none of my physicians and things like that did either. And then I went to go find the doctor who would throat swab test me, maybe so I could tell her that it wasn't me. At the end of the day, I just wasn't sure it was me. And I had to go to 3 different doctors until I found one who would throat swab test me. The first one said he didn't know what that was and he wasn't going to do it. The second one ordered it after I pushed back and pushed back. But then when I went to the lab in that doctor's office, the phlebotomist, who was not a young woman, and I have to assume had seen a thing or two, said, I don't know what this is, and I don't know how to, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but basically she had never done it before. And you have to imagine how many thousands of STI tests she has drawn and collected samples from. I finally found a doctor who did it, and sure enough, I had a completely asymptomatic case of oral gonorrhea. And it just really upset me because I know, at least in the community that I'm from, the swinger community, that generally speaking, people have unprotected oral sex. They have this kind of religious zeal for using condoms for penis and vaginal sex or penis and anus sex. Almost everybody does that exclusively, at least with new partners. But virtually no one uses protection for oral sex. And I'm very sex positive, and I think that's fine. You can make sex so safe that no one wants to have it anymore. There's some truth to that. But I just put 2 and 2 together in my mind, and I thought, okay, if almost everybody's having unprotected oral sex, and then they're going and getting tested, and they're not getting tested for the things they're most likely to have, then what the hell are we doing here? It just made no sense to me whatsoever. And I couldn't let it go. And so I basically, sorry to my wife, but took all of my life savings and started this company to try to do something that we feel like is better.
I love this story because I too have found that a lot of times people will say that they're clean. And when asked when they got tested, they may say within a 3-month period, are we getting all the information? How many partners have you had since that test? Were you oral swabbed or anal swabbed? If not, you may be clean in some aspects, but you may not be clean in other aspects. And so oral sex, I constantly talk about this. Oral sex is another way that all STIs, almost all of them virtually, can be transmitted. And there are even tests that are sexually transmitted infections that are not tested on a regular panel, like mycoplasma, ureaplasma. So even when somebody says, I'm clean, that doesn't necessarily mean they are. So you really have to take that sentence with a grain of salt and do more digging when you are having these very personal conversations. But yes, you should know the person's status before you jump into bed with them, because you are taking a risk, right? And yes, you can talk yourself out of having sex just by thinking about all of the negative things that come your way. But you have to have informed consent, and informed meaning you need all the details. And so I am so appreciate that you started this company called Shameless Care. So tell me what exactly you're testing for when you're testing someone, you're sending someone a lab kit for Shameless Care. How does it work? Tell me, like, how does somebody get a testing kit, etc., from the beginning to the end?
Okay, sure. When somebody orders a test kit at shamelesscare.com, it's not unlike the beginning of the process anyway, Eve, is not unlike buying a pair of socks on the internet. You add it to your cart, you check out, and then it gets a little bit different than the socks. Then you're transmitted over to a HIPAA-compliant patient medical intake form that asks a lot of private health information, including your pharmacy and your race, and asks if you're having symptoms, asks if you're on HIV antivirals, because that can affect testing, a bunch of medical questions like that. And then a board certified physician reviews the medical information and decides whether or not that patient is a good candidate for testing. Now, the obvious question is, people will say, why wouldn't the doctor want the person to get tested? They want to get tested. And in fact, they're paying for it. They're not even having their insurance pay for it. A lot of times people are seeking testing because they're having symptoms, and at-home testing like we offer is not appropriate for someone who is having symptoms, because it has to come to the person via the mail, and then it has to go back to the lab via the mail. And just that round trip alone means that if someone is having like discharge or serious pain or that sort of thing, they're going to be in a world of trouble by the time they get their test result. Initially, one of the most important things those doctors can do is just screen people who really shouldn't be getting tested through us, and instead refer them to an in-person provider. But the person collects their samples at home. And for us, for the HIV testing, it's OraQuick, which is the only FDA-approved home self-collection kit for HIV. For the rest of the blood tests, which for us is HSV2, which is rather controversial, and I'd be happy to talk about that. HSV2, syphilis, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. And then for gonorrhea and chlamydia, we do 3-site testing. We do genital, anal, and oral, understanding that not everybody has anal sex, but we didn't want to discriminate based upon the price of our kit. So in other words, we didn't want to have one kit that was X price and another kit that was $40 less or something like that didn't have the anal swab. So if somebody doesn't have anal sex and they don't want to do the anal swab, they just toss that in the trash, essentially. And then beyond the things I've already talked about is mycoplasma genitalium, which is an extremely common STI. And we find that although it's usually asymptomatic, a lot of people, when they finally do test positive or just test for mycoplasma genitalium at all, they realize, my God, what I thought was recurrent UTIs was actually this other thing, and trichomonas. And so that we have 14 different STIs, if you include HIV 1 and 2, which I really hate to do because that is just a marketing term. But I realized that everybody else on the internet was calling HIV 1 and 2 two separate infections. Any modern tests for both. So 13 to 14 STIs, depending upon how you want to think about HIV 1 and 2. And then once the results come in, that same board certified physician licensed in the patient's state reviews the medical information. And if that patient tests positive, then they're either counseled. So if someone has, a hepatitis B infection or something like that, and really needs to be referred to an in-person physician, then that is done. But if the person can be treated easily via telemedicine, like mycoplasma genitalium, for example, it's 2 different prescriptions sent to the local pharmacy, then that's included and just done automatically. And that's part of why we collect that pharmacy information at the beginning. And then, of course, there's mandatory reporting and some other things that we could go into. But that is basically it in a nutshell. We're proud of a lot of things we do at Shameless Care, but one of them is that there really, truly is a doctor who's involved in that patient's case from beginning to end. And in fact, reviews that patient's information twice, once when they order and again when the results come in. And treatment is just automatic and included in the price. And so those are all things that I think that we're really proud of at Shameless Care.
I love that it's very comprehensive, and the testing is very comprehensive too. You're covering tests that typically are not covered in a doctor's office. One of the statistics that I saw on your profile was that 80% of gonorrhea positive patients are oral only, meaning they don't have it genitally, they have it orally. 80%. That is such a huge number and very alarming. Can you speak on this?
Yeah, and I want to be clear, that's just our cases. When I look at research nationally, it's 18 to 36% of gonorrhea cases would have been missed with a genital-only test. Okay. For us, it's higher, and I have to assume it's because of that at-home asymptomatic screening, because genital gonorrhea is much more likely to become symptomatic. And so therefore, I think when you're testing people who have no symptoms at all, it stands to reason that more of them than not are going to be oral gonorrhea cases. But it's been reassuring because that's why I started the company, is because of my own situation and just this bug in my burr under my saddle of this isn't right. Somebody has to do something. So it's been reassuring, okay, we're doing the right thing. It's been horrifying from the standpoint of I see all of these other telemedicine companies that are doing urine-only testing, and I just can't help but think, my God, how many cases are we missing? And it's not that gonorrhea is life or death, but like when people go out to get tested, it's because they want to know if they have an STI. And so it really bothers me. It makes me sad, quite honestly. In the swinger community, there's a testing company that does not have an oral gonorrhea swab. And I wouldn't mind that kind of patient choice, Eve, if I thought people realized this, if I thought people were making the level-headed decision of, oh, this isn't going to test me orally, but that's okay. I only care about my genitals. But I just don't think people know that. And I think that these companies at the very least need to tell patients that. There should be some sort of disclaimer like, yes, we're testing for mycoplasma, trich, gonorrhea, chlamydia, but gonorrhea and chlamydia, just so you know, is genital only. So if you have a lot of oral sex, you may want to buy this supplemental package or that sort of thing. That would be my ultimate goal. If my little company at the end of the day can move everybody towards at least educating patients or customers, however you choose to think about them.
Absolutely. I think testing is so key, and testing for everything that could be possible is so key as well. And so I like to consider myself the face of safe sex, and I talk a lot about oral sex and how during oral sex you can still transmit infections. And so how do we protect ourselves from that, right? And with the man, if you're performing oral sex on a penis, there's always flavored condoms. Things exist in the world out there that you could protect yourself. When it comes to women, there's not as many options. And I actually developed a product that would protect women, and it's in the works still. I'm looking for funding. So anybody out there listening, I am definitely looking for funding to put this product on the market because it's so essential. What's available is a dental dam, which is something that was created for dentists to separate a tooth when they're getting treatment on their mouth. It has nothing to do with sex. And this is what's being used as a protection. And so there is a lot of misconception around people not even understanding that STIs can be transmitted orally. And then two, also, like you said, there's like a blanket, like ignorance around transmission in certain communities where people are using condoms for genital penetration, etc., but then completely ignoring the fact that they can be transmitting through oral. So do you want to just speak on that a little bit?
I think your product idea is fantastic. People often say, how do you know that most people are having unprotected oral sex? And I say, go to the local Walgreens or gas station or grocery store or wherever you can find condoms, and you tell me if you see a dental dam there. I've never seen one in a store. And so it's just obvious that people are not having protected oral sex. And if there was a better option, and Eve, I hope your product is fantastic. I must admit, I don't have funding to give you. Maybe a few years ago I did, but I'm invested all in this. I hope your product is wildly successful. Absolutely. It's just so interesting to me that people tend to learn about these things from each other, and particularly in the swinger world. And I know that maybe a few of your listeners are swingers, but certainly not all of them. And it's just the people that I'm used to and the people that I'm familiar with. People often learn from each other. And I still see this from Reddit all the time. And somebody will ask a question about STIs. And before I can even see it and answer it, somebody's, use a condom for penis and vaginal sex, and everything else is curable. And there is some truth to that. There is some truth to that. If you get syphilis from oral sex, you're not going to die from it. It's not 1805 anymore. And thank goodness for that. But at the same time, I just feel like people need better educated about it and realize that condom and the way that they're using it is not the on-off switch between safe sex and unsafe sex. And that bothers me quite a bit, is like this idea like somebody in a swinger club, for example, could have oral sex with 7 people, but she put a condom on before she rode cowgirl on that one guy towards the end. So therefore she had safe sex. But somebody who wouldn't have used a condom in that situation was wildly dangerous and didn't have safe sex. And it's just not that black-white. It's all on a spectrum. It's all on the safe sex spectrum. And the condom and the way that person uses it is a tool on that spectrum, as is testing. And I would argue that testing is just a fundamentally important part of that equation.
100%. There's so much that I want to unpack with what you said, but specifically, there are STIs that may not be AIDS or HIV that can eventually cause death if not treated. But there are things like genital warts that actually can cause a woman to have uterine cancer, which can cause death. It can also cause throat cancer, which can cause death. So we're talking about sexually transmitted infections that, yes, many of them do have, a cure for. And if it's a bacterial infection, you can take an antibiotic and it will eventually go away and your symptoms will disappear. Or if you're asymptomatic, you will be cleared from that. But then there are the viral infections, and HIV being one of those that can live with you forever, as well as the genital warts, as well as herpes. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you said that was controversial, right, in your testing. And I would love to hear what controversy is around that testing for you.
Okay. Herpes simplex virus testing for people who are having an outbreak. So they go to their physician, it's swabbed, a DNA test is done on that swab. They can confirm completely if you have HSV and even tell you what type that you have. There's no controversy around that whatsoever. There is controversy around asymptomatic blood screening for herpes simplex virus 1 and herpes simplex virus 2. And the United States Preventative Services Task Force is the group of 16 people which meet 3 times a year and basically decide all preventative care in the United States. They decide what is an A rating, what's a B rating, what's a C rating, so on and so forth. They decide through the Affordable Care Act what is covered by insurance and what isn't. Somewhat, they decide what is covered with no copay. The mandatory preventative screenings that they decide are an A rating are covered 100%. And they don't rate the serological HSV testing as very high for a few reasons. One of which is that the testing is not as accurate as it could be. I've seen some of the inaccuracy numbers pretty exaggerated. Some people say it's 50% chance of getting a false positive. That's not really true with the modern testing, but it's not as accurate as some other tests. That is true. But more so, it's like a lot of people can be infected with HSV and have never had a single outbreak in their life. And we see this all the time in Shameless Care. So honestly, I could make a case that we shouldn't include HSV blood testing at all. Patients seem to really want it for some reason. But then those same people who want it when they test positive sometimes have a full-blown panic attack, even though they've never had an outbreak in their life. And therefore, it's not impacting them at all. And therefore, they're also very unlikely to ever spread this to anybody else. So you're providing the patient with information that has probably caused them more harm than good in that situation. And so for those reasons, it's controversial. And for those reasons, a lot of clinicians are no longer offering it. Some hospital systems are no longer offering it. And to be honest with you, we probably shouldn't offer it either.
I disagree. I think that knowing all of the details is so important because that is another sexually transmitted infection. And even though the HSV1, right, 66% of people have it, right? And then HSV2, the number is less, but they're both sexually transmitted infections. And that is information that you should be able to know about yourself so that you can have that conversation with your partner so that they can make a willing decision whether or not they want to engage with you in sexual activity. And if you are eliminating a test, and I agree with you, many testing kits or even getting tested at the doctor's office, sometimes if you're not getting tested for those things, it's super important to know all of your status from the beginning to the end. Every single test, I think, is super important. And so the more, the better, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. It's a controversy that I can see both sides of. I hearken back to my college days. I had an entomology professor that, and for your listeners who may not be familiar, this is the study of insects. And he was a brilliant man, in my opinion. And he would talk about genetically modified organisms, GMOs, for those of you that are just used to hearing it that way. And he could spend 15 minutes and you would swear he worked for Monsanto. And then he could spend another 15 minutes and you would think he worked for Greenpeace. He was just absolutely brilliant. He honestly could not pin him on an actual opinion of his. He could communicate both sides of the argument brilliantly. And I'm not brilliant, but I think that's where I am with the HSV testing. Like, we obviously still offer it, but I just see the way that the patients often react to it, and it's not in line with the reality of the situation for them. They see it as like a death sentence rather than just a data point about their body. And we're still working on how to try to fix that. One of the things that we do is after people mail in their kits, they get an email just about HSV testing, which basically says that, Eve. It says, you may test positive for this. If so, it means you've been exposed to the virus and you've developed antibodies. But if you're not having any outbreaks, if you've never had an outbreak, et cetera, it just goes into it and tries to give them a little bit of grounding before they get this result. Because it's funny, people can test positive for somewhat serious viral infections like Hep B and not respond to it as negatively as they do like an HSV test when they've literally never had an outbreak. It's just a really interesting thing. And we're trying to figure out how to provide them with that information without like wrecking their life, if that makes sense.
I think that this is exactly why people are getting tested, to find out what is going on with their bodies head to toe. And if you are eliminating a test because you don't want to upset somebody, any test that's positive is going to be upsetting, whether it's gonorrhea, it's herpes, it's HIV, all of those things are going to cause a reaction. Nobody wants to hear that they're positive for anything. And that being said, this test is so important because it's so widespread and people don't know that they have it. And so they could be spreading something that they don't even know that they have. Now, in an asymptomatic state, most likely they won't be spreading it, right? But people should know the difference. And so I think it's so important to have these conversations so that people know that it's not a death sentence if you are positive for herpes 1 or 2. However, you should know that about yourself so that you can share that with your partner. And I want to know, what other kinds of conversations about sex and health should we be having but aren't? I think that we're in that conversation right now, but do you have anything else to say about that particular question?
Yes, and we've covered this a little bit, Eve, but I just wish people would stop using the term tested or full panel or tested for everything, because it is shorthand for nothing. It has no definition. Even the term 10 panel test means nothing. And I still struggle with this. My buddy the other day was telling me about his testing, and I was like, what were you tested for? He goes, oh, the standard 9 panel. And I was like, that doesn't mean any, like literally tell me what
are the 9 things? Like, what are those 9 things? Because it could be a whole host of different combinations of things, right?
Absolutely. You're exactly right, Eve. And so I just think that people need to stop thinking about an STI test as if it is a thing, and instead just think about these individual infections. You hit it earlier, but what I often say is that instead of people saying I'm tested and I'm clean, and no one should use the term clean, but people do. And so I guess that's why I'm using it in this context. What people should say is, I was tested for some of the infections in some of the places. And for those infections and in those places, I tested negative, because that's really the true statement of it. And I just think that people, that's the main thing, is that they just think that phrase, I was tested, or STI test, or STI panel, or 10 panel, or all of that stuff means something, and it just doesn't.
Absolutely. And also, when were you tested? Unless you were tested yesterday and had no sex since yesterday, you may have something that you don't know that you have, because many of the STIs are asymptomatic. So it's super important to get details and to really break down that conversation, because if you're trying to have a relationship with somebody and you want to move on to the space where you're maybe having unprotected sex together, or if you're in a party like a swingers party or an ethically non-monogamous lifestyle event and you want to have some fun with somebody, you need to have more details to have informed consent around moving forward.
Yeah. And I would argue that if somebody can't be bothered to memorize the things that they were tested for so they can have an off-the-cuff conversation about it, then casual sex may not be for them. That seems like the bare minimum, is to figure out what you were tested for, if nothing else. Even if you're not ready to advocate for more in the doctor's office, at least figure out what you were tested for so that you can memorize that and have a real off-the-cuff conversation about it.
Or keeping the panel in your phone, something that you should have with you. If you are in the lifestyle of having, and I'm not even talking about the swingers lifestyle or the ethically non-monogamous lifestyle, I'm just talking about regular people hooking up from like meeting at a bar or at a club. If you are having a sexually active lifestyle, you should be carrying around your most recent panel and be able to discuss it in a very frank way. And what other questions should we be asking our potential partners, when they say, I'm clean, but maybe not? Am I missing anything here?
First, I just want to tell you a humor story from my life years ago. This was probably 10 years ago, but I had heard on a swinger podcast that you should have this safe sex conversation before you have sex with someone. Duh, but it was new information to me at the time. And one of the questions was...
Which is why we keep having to have these conversations, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the questions was, you start off by talking about when you were tested. And again, I was thinking that tested was a thing then. Now I don't. But this story was from years ago. That you should tell people when you were tested and then ask when they were tested. And that's a great way to open up this conversation. And I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. So we were in a swinger club and we entered into a playroom with a couple. And I asked them that question, and I had to work up my nerve to do it, because I feel like everything in life, you get more comfortable the more often you do it. This isn't my first podcast interview. My first one, I was way more nervous than I am now. Safe Sex Talks is the same way. And I asked him, I said, okay, we were tested on such and such day. When were you tested? And this guy looked me straight in the eye and said, oh, we're tested at work. And for some reason, I took that as like a logical answer, which of course it was the stupidest thing in the world. It made no sense. I woke up the next day and I was like, what the hell was that guy talking about? And why did I take that as like an answer? It's sometimes hard to look back at how stupid, at least for me, how stupid I've been at certain points in my life. Absolutely. I think people should also be having conversations about protection way before it comes to sex. I know that in the swinger lifestyle, it's just basically understood that the default is that you're going to have unprotected oral sex and protected penis and vaginal sex, and anything outside of that requires another conversation. But I feel like that conversation should just take place every single time, and there shouldn't really be a default. Because for one thing, it does make it more difficult for people who choose to use protection for oral sex. If they have to constantly fight against what is the default position and constantly advocate for themselves instead of having a brand new conversation with people every single time. And so that's another thing that I think people should definitely be discussing.
I agree 100%. I think that we need to be having these conversations. And yes, is it awkward? Is it nerve-wracking? Absolutely. Especially with somebody that, you like and you really want to have some fun with. But if they are coming back at you and saying, oh, no, I don't want to use any protection for oral sex, or no, I don't want to use any protection for penetrative sex. I only want to go raw, right? And you will come across people like this. This is not something that's unusual. You need to realize that red flags should be waving in your mind and really thinking about whether you want to consent to something like that if you don't have any more details about their history. It's very important to have these conversations. Let's see. I think that we've covered all of the questions that I have for you, and I want to get into our role play.
Even if you don't mind, I have one more thing I want to make sure
Sure.
your listeners know about. We don't accept insurance at Shameless Care, and so
Yes.
and we test for 14 things, and there's a doctor who's involved not once but twice. So it's not inexpensive, and I realize that it's difficult for a lot of people to afford. But I don't want people to think that the choice is between Shameless Care or whatever their doctor wants to do, because what their doctor wants to do may not be quite good enough. We do have a resource on our website, and there people can screenshot the tests that we include, and they can take that to their doctor. And maybe they want to add some additional ones as well, but that's a starting point for them. But then one of the things I'm particularly proud of, Eve, is that we have a video on there from a doctor to the person, teaching them how to advocate for themselves in the exam room. And then there's a second video there from a doctor, and it's only a 60-second video. So if someone's in the exam room and their doctor is saying to them what my doctor said to me, which is, I'd be happy to throat swab test you, I just don't know what that is, and therefore I'm not going to do it. It's a 60-second video where this doctor is talking to that doctor and says, oh, don't worry, it's the orange Aptima swab. You already have it in your exam room. It's the same one used for strep throat, same swab. Matter of fact, you collect the sample the same way, you code it in your computer this way. And it's just so cool. And we're happy that people can basically use us without becoming our customer. Obviously, we need customers to stay in business. But the last thing I want is somebody just not getting tested or not getting tested well because they can't afford to do the Shameless Care option. So I just want to let people know about that. And I appreciate you letting me do so.
I really appreciate you having said that, because one of the things that I love to talk about is us advocating for ourselves and our health when we go to a doctor's office. And oftentimes we will get on the other side, I don't know what you're talking about. And so to have a video like that you can share with your doctor is invaluable. And I really commend you for creating something like that, because yes, not everybody's going to be able to afford your 14 panel test, but they can go into their doctor's office and get the testing that is offered. And then they can say, I would like these additional tests done as well. And if the doctor doesn't know what they're doing, they can share that information. So that is a beautiful thing that you've created for people. And I really do commend you for that. One more question that I wanted to ask before we get into the role play is, how often do you recommend that people get tested?
That's an impossible question to answer because it really depends upon their sexual activity. And there really is a debate between timeliness and thoroughness. And I think it's easy to say, oh, somebody should be tested really often. Like in the adult industry, I think they're tested every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. And that gets to be a little impractical for people who aren't making their living in sex work. And there's plenty of people that may only be active with new partners. I think I'm thinking of the swinger lifestyle again, and I'm sorry that I do that. It's just the group of people that I'm most familiar with. But for example, there might be a school teacher from Iowa who goes to Hedonism Resort one time a year, has a really fun week, and then she's monogamous for the next 51 weeks. And so in her case, she may just need to get tested once or twice per year. So it's impossible to say. But I keep going back to thoroughness, because when you think about things like Mycoplasma genitalium or trichomonas is the single most common curable STI in the United States, very few people are tested for it. It really doesn't matter how frequently you're not tested for it. You're still not ever going to know if you have it. And some of these things you can have potentially for years. And so the other thing I wanted to mention too is like some of these infections like Mycoplasma genitalium, nobody really knows what the incubation period is on it. We only discovered it in the 1980s. We really don't know much about it at all, to be honest with you. And when I look at resources online, some of them say you can test 6 weeks after exposure. Another one might say 2 months. Another one might say 6 months. Truth is, we don't know. It's just this really slow growing, tiny little bacteria. And so you really can't put a definitive like, oh, I got laid on Tuesday, so in 3 weeks from Tuesday, I can get tested and know if I have Mycoplasma genitalium. So now it might not pop up for 7 months. So I think that scheduling may also be really key as well. So whatever that works for people's life. Maybe it's once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, 6 times a year, whatever. I have the instinct that scheduling and making sure that it stays on the top of the to-do list is really important.
Yes. And I like that answer because really it depends, right? It depends on a person's lifestyle. It depends on how sexually active they are. It depends on how often they're having sex with partners that they don't know all of the details about, etc. Whether they're monogamous, whether they're ethically non-monogamous, whether they're swingers. There's just so many different variables that can go into understanding how often you should be tested. However, if you are sexually active and are having multiple partners, whether that be in a swinger community or outside, because this is very common in people that are single, right? They go on a date and they go on another date and then they go on a different date. And then, so this is very common for people to be sexually active. We do not live in a world where abstinence is something that's common anymore, really. Sexual activity is more common than not, right? So if you're a sexually active person, you should be getting tested, in my opinion, at least every 3 months. And if you've had an episode where your condom has broken, somebody has had oral sex on you and it was unprotected, any kind of activity that could be deemed as a little dangerous, right? Or possibly a place where you could have become infected, then you should just go ahead and test after an incident like that as well. And that is my personal opinion. But as the face of safe sex, I like to make sure that people are really taking care of their health. And like I mentioned before, some of these STIs can over time cause cancer or something that can be deadly. So we really do need to know what our status is.
I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I want to talk about our role play because I think it's going to be a really interesting one.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Hey, let's talk about your expense report.
I didn't submit an expense report.
You will. Custom saddles and dog training services are not within policy.
What are you talking about?
SAP Concur uses advanced AI to audit and automatically detect out-of-policy expenses. It's the breakthrough I needed to focus more on our future.
These are my future expenses?
Yes, and self-defense classes are out of policy.
I'll need self-defense classes?
You will.
For what?
It's a big dog.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states, and MLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
We've decided that we're going to do a role play where we are in a relationship. We've been together for an undetermined period of time, but we've decided that at this stage in our relationship, we want to take it to the physical realm and we want to start having some fun sexually, right? And so we're going to have a conversation around that. And are we ready?
I think so. Yeah, this will be exciting. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do here, but I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, it's off the cuff. Just have fun. Okay, and action.
All right. Eve, I think you're really fantastic, and I would love to get to know you more in an intimate sort of way. But before we do that, is there any requirements or questions that you have?
Yes, intimacy is a word that, can really mean a lot of different things. And so I would love to know what intimacy means for you. And before you answer that, I'll just tell you what intimacy means for me. And so it's not just about sex. I love deep kissing. I love exploring sensually. And I love not just penetrative sex, but I really love oral sex as well. So those are things that I enjoy. And so I would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I would love to do all of those things. Absolutely. But before we do that, let's talk about safe sex a little bit. So I was just tested 8 months ago, and I can certainly show you those test results. How about you?
I was tested 2 months ago, and I appreciate that you tell me how long it's been since you've been tested. Have you had any partners since the testing that you did 8 months ago? I don't need to know all of the details, but obviously I would like to know if you've had a partner or multiple partners since then.
Sure. Yeah, I've had 2 partners since then, I must say. So 2 partners since my testing, that was 8 months ago.
Okay. And were you having unprotected sex with either one of them? And by that, I'm not just talking about penetrative sex. I'm also talking about oral sex.
Oh, if you count unprotected oral sex as unprotected sex, which I never have in the past, but if you do, then yes, I must say I was having unprotected sex with them.
Okay. I so appreciate your honesty because I feel like this is exactly why we need to have this conversation. And as much as I would like to move forward with you and move into the intimate part of our relationship, I think it would be really great if we could go together and get tested and share our results before we move into that phase of our relationship. Would that be agreeable to you?
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Absolutely.
Thank you for not being in a hurry and for really appreciating that I want us to be safe and I want us to have an intimate relationship that we can build on the foundation of safety. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And scene.
It would be real hard to know, should I say the things that I feel like people often say, or because I have to take off my hat as like someone who's really invested in this world and play it in the way like a common man would. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you said 8 months ago, right? That's often what you hear. You're like, oh yeah, I got tested like a year ago. And that basically means 0 at this point because so many things could have happened in that amount of time, right? And I definitely appreciate you going in that direction. That was a lot of fun. And I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. Where can we find you?
You can find me at the Shameless Care podcast, but maybe more importantly at shamelesscare.com, where we have a wide range of medications, sexual health medications, and also the STI testing. And just maybe more importantly for everybody, a lot of great resources about STIs and things like that on that website for everybody to take a look at.
What a great resource. Everybody out there listening to this show, it's such a great resource. If nothing else, gaining information from this website, shamelesscare.com, and the video that you talked about that you can show to your doctor so that they can help you to get tested for oral gonorrhea. So key, because really we do need to advocate for ourselves and our health when we're walking into our doctor's office. What you're getting tested for, the panels that you're getting tested for, do not cover everything. And so you need to be aware of that so that you can ask for the additional testing if that's something that you're interested in getting. And I think everyone should be interested in getting it because you should know everything about your health, not just a select few things. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
I had a great time. Thank you so much.
I want to make sure that my listeners can find me as well. You can go to pleaseme.online and you can find my shows there, lots of webinars that I've done that are educational, as well as I have a beautifully curated sex toy store there with lots of different fun things that you can incorporate into the bedroom, as well as things that I recommend for my patients, like penis pumps if you have erectile dysfunction. There's just a whole host of lots of things on my website, pleaseme.online. And also, I want to, as you can see, the ticker going across the bottom of the page here, I was nominated for 2 ASN awards, one for best website and one for best educator website, and the other for best educator. So please go to the show notes and cast your vote for me daily. I would love to win these awards, and I need your help to bring those home. So thank you so much again for being on the show today. Robert, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Until next time, are you looking for a sexy date? Look no further than SDC.com. SDC.com is the premier ethically non-monogamous website that is worldwide. It also hosts a wealth of information on sexuality and sexual health, and I host a free live webinar monthly on the site. You can use code 37340 for a free trial membership on me, and be sure to reach out on the site and say hello.